Part 2, Chapter 6 of A Bid for Fortune by Guy Boothby. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Chapter 6, Conclusion. Once we had left her side and turned our boat's nose towards the land, the yacht lay behind us, a black mass, nearly absorbed in the general shadow. Not a light showed itself, and everything was as still as the grave. The only noise to be heard was the steady dip-dip of the oars in the smooth water, and now and then the chirp of the rowlocks. For nearly half an hour we pulled on, pausing at intervals to listen, but nothing of an alarming nature met our ears. The island was every moment growing larger, the beach more plain to the eye, and the hill more clearly defined. As soon as the boat grounded, we sprang out, and leaving one hand to look after her, made our way ashore. It was a strange experience, that landing on a strange beach on such an errand and at such an hour, but we were all too much taken up with the work which lay before us to think of that. Having left the water's edge, we came to a standstill beneath a group of palms and discussed the situation. As the command of the expedition had fallen upon me, I decided upon the following course of action. To begin with, I would leave the party behind me and set out by myself to ascertain the whereabouts of the hut. Having discovered this, I would return, and we would thereupon make our way inland and endeavour to capture it. I explained the idea in as few words as possible to my followers, and then, bidding them wait for me where they were, at the same time warning them against letting their presence be discovered, I set off up the hill in the direction I knew the plateau to lie. The undergrowth was very thick and the ground rocky. For this reason it was nearly 20 minutes before I readied the top of the hill. Then down the other side I crept, picking my way carefully and taking infinite precautions that no noise should serve to warn our foes of my coming. At last I reached the plateau and looked about me. A small perpendicular cliff some 60 feet in height was before me, so throwing myself down upon my stomach, I wriggled my way to its edge. When I got there I looked over and discovered 3 well-built huts on a little plateau at the cliff's base. At the same moment a roar of laughter greeted my ears from the building on the left. It was followed by the voice of a man singing to the accompaniment of a banjo. Under cover of his music I rose to my feet and crept back through the bushes. By the track along which I had come, I knew enough to distribute my forces now. Having reached my friends again, I informed them of what I had seen, and we then arranged the mode of attack as follows. The mate of the yacht with 2 of the hands would pass round the hill to the left of the plateau. Wetherell and another couple of men would take the right side, while Beckenham and myself crept down from the back. Not a sound was to be made or a shot fired until I blew my whistle. Then, with one last word of caution, we started our climb. By this time the clouds had cleared off the sky and the stars shone brightly. Once more I arrived at the small precipice behind the huts, and having done so sat down for a few moments to give the other parties time to take up their positions. Then, signing to Beckenham to accompany me, I followed the trend of the precipice along till I discovered a place where we might descend in safety. In less than a minute we were on the plateau below, creeping towards the centre hut. Still our approach was undetected. Bidding Beckenham in a whisper to wait for me, I crept cautiously round to the front, keeping as much as possible in the shadow. As soon as I had found the door, I tiptoed towards it and prepared to force my way inside. But I had an adventure in store for me which I had not anticipated. Seated in the doorway, almost hidden in the shadow, was the figure of a man. He must have been asleep, for he did not become aware of my presence until I was within a foot of him. Then he sprang to his feet and was about to give the alarm. Before he could do so, however, I was upon him. A desperate hand-to-hand struggle followed, in which I fought solely for his throat. This once obtained, I tightened my fingers upon it and squeezed until he fell back unconscious. It was like a horrible nightmare, that combat without noise in the dark entry of the hut, and I was more than thankful that it ended so satisfactorily for me. As soon as I had disentangled myself, I rose to my feet and proceeded across his body into the hut itself. A swing door led from the porch, and this I pushed open. "Who is it, and what do you want?" said a voice which I should have recognised anywhere. In answer I took Phyllis in my arms, and whispering my name I kissed her over and over again. She uttered a little cry of astonishment and delight. Then, bidding her step quietly, I passed out into the starlight, leading her after me. As we were about to make for the path by which I had descended, Beckenham stepped forward. At the same instant the man with whom I had been wrestling came to his senses and gave a shout of alarm. In an instant there was a noise of scurrying feet and a great shouting of orders. "Make for the boats!" I cried at the top of my voice, and taking Phyllis by the hand, set off as quickly as I could go up the path, Beckenham assisting her on the other side. If I live to be 100, I shall never forget that rush up the hill, in and out of the trees and bushes, scratching ourselves and tearing our clothes. We dashed, conscious only of the necessity for speed. Before we were halfway down the other side, Phyllis's strength was quite exhausted, so I took her in my arms and carried her the remainder of the distance. At last we reached the boat and jumped on board. The rest of the party were already there, and the word having been given, we prepared to row out to the yacht. But before we could push off, a painful surprise was in store for us. The Marquis, who had been counting the party, cried, "Where's Mr. Wetherell?" We looked round upon each other, and surely enough the old gentleman was missing. Discovering this, Phyllis nearly gave way, and implored us to go back at once to find him. But having rescued her with so much difficulty, I did not wish to run any risk of letting her fall into her enemy's hands again. So, selecting 4 volunteers from the party, I bade the rest pull the boat out to the yacht and give Miss Wetherell to the captain's charge, while the others accompanied me ashore again in search of her father. Having done this, the boat was to return and wait for us. Quickly we splashed our way back to the beach, and then plunging into the undergrowth began our search for the missing man. As we did not know where to search, it was like looking for a needle in a bundle of hay. But presently one of the hands remembered having seen him descending the hill, so we devoted our attentions to that side. For nearly 2 hours we toiled up and down, but without success. Not a sign of the old gentleman was to be seen. Could he have mistaken his way and be even now searching for us on another beach? To make sure of this we set off and thoroughly searched the 2 bays in the direction he would most likely have taken, but still without success. Perhaps he had been captured and carried back to the huts. In that case we had better proceed thither and try to rescue him. This, however, was a much more serious undertaking, and you may imagine it was with considerable care that we approached the plateau again. When we reached it, the huts were quiet as when I had first made their acquaintance. Not a sound came up to the top of the little precipice, save the rustling of the wind and the palms at its foot. It seemed difficult to believe that there had been such a tumult on the spot so short a time before. Again, with infinite care, we crept down to the buildings, this time, however, without encountering a soul. The first was empty, so was the second, so was the third. The result was quite unexpected, and rendered the situation even more serious than before. By the time we had thoroughly explored the plateau and its surroundings, it was nearly daylight, and still we had discovered no trace of the missing man. Just as the sun rose above the sea line, we descended the hill again, and I commenced a second search along the beach, with no better luck, however, than on the previous occasion. Wetherell and our assailants seemed to have completely disappeared from the island. About 6 o'clock, thoroughly worn out, we returned to the spot where the boat was waiting for us. What was to be done? We could not, for obvious reasons, leave the island and abandon the old gentleman to his fate, and yet it seemed useless to remain there looking for him, when he might have been spirited away elsewhere. Suddenly one of the crew, who had been loitering behind, came into view, waving something in his hand. As he approached, we could see that it was a sheet of paper, and when he gave it into my hands, I read as follows: "If you cross the island to the north beach, you will find a small cliff in which is a large cave a little above high water mark. There you will discover the man for whom you are searching." There was no signature to this epistle, and the writing was quite unfamiliar to me, but I had no reason to doubt its authenticity. "Where did you discover this?" I inquired of the man who had brought it. "Fastened to one of them prickly bushes up on the beach there, sir," he answered. "Well, the only thing for us to do now is to set off to the north shore and hunt for the cave. 2 of you had better take the boat back to the yacht and ask the captain to follow us round." As soon as the boat was under way, we picked up our rifles and set off for the north beach. It was swelteringly hot by this time, and, as may be imagined, we were all dead tired after our long night's work. However, the men knew they would be amply rewarded if we could effect the rescue of the man for whom we had been searching, so they pushed on. At last we turned the cape and entered the bay, which constituted the north end of the island. It was not a large beach on this side, but it had at its western end a curious line of small cliffs. in the centre of which a small black spot could be discerned, looking remarkably like the entrance to a cave. Towards this we pressed, forgetting our weariness in the excitement of the search. It was a cave, and a large one. So far the letter was correct. Preparing ourselves in case of surprise, we approached the entrance, calling Mr. Wetherell's name. As our shouts died away, a voice came out in answer, and thereupon we rushed in. A remarkable sight met our eyes. In the centre of the cave was a stout upright post, some 6 or 8 feet in height, and securely tied to this was the Colonial Secretary of New South Wales. In less time almost than it takes to tell, we had cast loose the ropes which bound him, and led him, for he was too weak to stand alone, out into the open air. While he was resting, he inquired after his daughter, and having learned that she was safe, gave us the following explanation. Addressing himself to me, he said, "When you cried 'make for the boats,' I ran up the hill with the others as fast as I could go, but I'm an old man and could not get along as quickly as I wanted to, and for this reason was soon left far behind. I must have been halfway down the hill when a tall man dressed in white stepped out from behind a bush, and raising a rifle bade me come to a standstill. Having no time to lift my own weapon, I was obliged to do as he ordered me, and he thereupon told me to lay down my weapon and right about face. In this fashion I was marched back to the huts we had just left, and then another man, having joined my captor, was conducted across the island to this beach where a boat was waiting. In it I was pulled out to a small schooner lying at anchor in the bay and ordered to board her. 5 minutes later I was conducted to the saloon. "Good evening, Mr. Wetherell." "This is indeed a pleasure," said a man sitting at the farther end of the table. He was playing with a big black cat, and directly I heard his voice I knew that I was in the presence of Dr. Nikola. "And how do you think I am going to punish you, my friend, for giving me all this trouble?" he said, when I made no reply to his first remark. "You dare not do anything to me," I answered. "I demand that you let me go this instant. I have a big score to settle with you." "If you will be warned by me, you will cease to demand," he answered, his eyes the while burning like coals. "You are an obstinate man, but though you have put me to so much trouble and expense, I will forgive you and come to terms with you. Now listen to me. If you will give me—" At that moment the little vessel gave a heavy roll, and in trying to keep my footing on the sloping deck I fell over upon the table. As I did so the little Chinese stick slipped out of my pocket and went rolling along directly into Nikola's hands. He sprang forward and seized it, and you may imagine his delight. With a cry of triumph that made the cat leap from his shoulder, he turned to a tall man by his side and said, "I've got it at last. Now let a boat's crew take this man ashore and tie him to the stake in the cave. Then devise some means of acquainting his friends of his whereabouts. Be quick, for we sail in an hour." Having given these orders, he turned to me again and said, "Mr. Wetherell, this is the last transaction we shall probably ever have together. All things considered, you are lucky in escaping so easily. It would have saved you a good deal if you had complied with my request at first. However, all's well that ends well, and I congratulate you upon your charming daughter. Now good-bye. In an hour I am off to effect a coup with this stick, the magnitude of which you would never dream. One last word of advice. Pause a second time, I entreat, before you think of balking Dr. Nikola." I was going to reply when I was twisted round and led up on deck, where that scoundrel Baxter had the impudence to make me a low bow. In less than a quarter of an hour I was fastened to the post in that cave. The rest you know. Now let us get on board. I see the boat is approaching. As soon as the surf boat had drawn up on the beach, we embarked and were pulled out to the yacht. In a few moments we were on deck, and Phyllis was in her father's arms again. By midday the island had disappeared under the sea line, and by nightfall we were well on our way back to Sydney. That evening after dinner Phyllis and I patrolled the deck together, and finally came to a standstill aft. It was as beautiful an evening as any man or woman could desire. All round us was the glassy sea, rising and falling as if asleep, while overhead the tropic stars shone down with their wonderful brilliance. "Phyllis," I said, taking my darling's hand in mine and looking into her face, "what a series of adventures we have both passed through since that afternoon I first saw you in the Domain. Do you know that your father has at last consented to our marriage?" "I do, and as it's to you, Dick, I owe my rescue," she said, coming a little closer to me. "He could do nothing else. You have a perfect right to me." "I have, and I mean to assert it," I answered. "If I had not found you, I should never have been happy again. But, Dick, there is one thing I don't at all understand. At dinner this evening the captain addressed you as Sir Richard. What does that mean?" "Why, of course you've not heard," I cried. "Well, I think it means that though I cannot make you a marchioness, I can make you a baronet's wife. It remains with you to say whether you will be Lady Hatteras or not." Then I explained how I had inherited the title and estates. Her only reply was to kiss me softly on the cheek. She had scarcely done so before her father and Beckenham came along the deck. "Now, Phyllis," said the former, leading her to a seat, "supposing you give us the history of your adventures. Remember, we have heard nothing yet." "Very well. Where shall I begin? At the moment I left the house for the ball? Very good. Well, you must know that when I arrived at Government House I met Mrs. Mayford, the lady who had promised to chaperon me, in the cloak room, and we passed into the ballroom together. I danced the first dance with Captain Hackworth, one of the aides, and engaged myself for the fourth to the Marquis of Beckenham." "The sham Marquis, unfortunately," put in the real one. "It proved to be unfortunate for me also," continued Phyllis. "As it was a square, we sat it out in the anteroom leading off the drawing room, and while we were there the young gentleman did me the honour of proposing to me. It was terribly embarrassing for me, but I allowed him to see, as unmistakably as possible, that I could give him no encouragement, and, as the introduction to the next waltz started, we parted the best of friends. About half an hour later, just as I was going to dance the valses, Mrs. Mayford came towards me and drew me into the drawing room. Mr. Baxter, his lordship's tutor, was with her, and I noticed that they both looked supernaturally grave. "What is the matter?" I asked, becoming alarmed by her face. "My dear," said she, "you must be brave. I have come to tell you that your father has been taken ill and has sent for you." "Papa ill?" I cried. "Oh, I must go home to him at once." "I've taken the liberty of facilitating that," said Mr. Baxter, "by ordering the servants to call up your carriage, which is now waiting for you at the door. If you will allow me, I will conduct you to it." I apologized to my partner for being compelled to leave him, and then went to the cloak room. As soon as I was ready, I accompanied Mr. Baxter to the door, where the brougham was waiting. Without looking at the coachman, I got in, at the same time thanking my escort for his kindness. He shut the door and cried "Home" to the coachman. Next moment we were spinning down the drive. As I was far too much occupied thinking of you, papa, I did not notice the direction we were taking, and it was not until the carriage stopped before a house in a back street that I realized that something was wrong. Then the door was opened, and a gentleman in evening dress begged me to alight. I did so almost without thinking what I was doing. "I am sorry to say your father is not at all well, Miss Wetherell," said the person who helped me out. "If you will be good enough to step into my house, I will let the nurse take you to him." Like a person in a dream, I followed him into the dwelling. "Where is my father, and how is it that he is here?" I cried, beginning to get frightened. "You will know all when you see him," said my companion, throwing open the door of a bedroom. I went in, and that door was also shut upon me. Then I turned and faced the man. "What was he like?" cried Wetherell. "He was the man you were telling us about at dinner, Dr. Nikola." "Ah, and then?" "He politely but firmly informed me that I was his prisoner, and that until you gave up something he had for years been trying to obtain, he would be compelled to detain me. I threatened, entreated, and finally wept, but he was not to be moved. He promised that no effort should be spared to make me comfortable, but he could not let me go until you had complied with his request. So I was kept there until late one night, when I was informed that I must be ready to leave the house. A brougham was at the door, and in this, securely guarded, I was conducted to the harbour, where a boat was in waiting. In this we were rowed out to a schooner, and I was placed on board her. A comfortably furnished cabin was allotted to me, and everything I could possibly want was given me. But though the greatest consideration in all other matters was shown me, I could gather nothing of where we were going or what my fate was to be, nor could I discover any means of communicating with the shore. About midnight we got under way and commenced our voyage. Our destination was the island where you found me." "And how did Nikola treat you during the voyage and your stay on Pipa Lannu?" I asked. "With invariable courtesy," she replied. A more admirable host no one could desire. I had but to express a wish, and it was instantly gratified. When we were clear of the land, I was allowed on deck. My meals were served to me in a cabin adjoining my own, and a stewardess had been specially engaged to wait upon me. As far as my own treatment went, I had nothing to complain of. But oh, you can't tell how thankful I was to get away. I imagined all sorts of horrors. Well, God be thanked, it's all done with now, I said earnestly. And what is more, said Wetherell, you have won one of the best husbands in the world. Mr. Hatteras, your hand, sir. Phyllis, my darling, yours. God bless you both. A week later, the eventful voyage was over, and we were back in Sydney again. Then came our marriage, but with your kind permission, I will only give you a very bare description of that. It took place at the cathedral, the primate officiating. The Marquis of Beckenham was kind enough to act as my best man, while the colonial secretary, of course, gave his daughter away. And now I come to think of it, there is one point I must touch upon in connection with that happy occasion. That was the arrival of an important present on the evening prior to the event. We were sitting in the drawing room when the butler brought in a square parcel on the salver and handed it to Phyllis. Another present, I expect, she said, and began to untie the string that bound it. When the first cover was removed, a layer of tissue paper revealed itself, and after that a large Russia leather case came into view. On pressing the spring, the cover lifted and revealed a superb collet, as I believe it is called, of diamonds, and resting against the lid a small card bearing this inscription: with heartiest congratulations and best wishes to Lady Hatteras, in memory of an unfortunate detention and a voyage to the southern seas, from her sincere admirer, Dr. Nikola. What do you think of that? Well, to bring my long story to a close, the great event passed off with much éclat. We spent our honeymoon in the Blue Mountains, and a fortnight later sailed once more for England in the Orizaba. Both Mr. Wetherell, who has now resigned office, and the Marquis of Beckenham, who is as manly a fellow as you would meet anywhere in England, accompanied us home, and it was to the latter seaside residence that we went immediately on our arrival in the mother country. My own New Forest residence is being thoroughly renovated, and will be ready for occupation in the spring. And now as to the other persons who have figured most prominently in my narrative. Of Nikola, Baxter, Eastover, or Prendergast I have never heard since. What gigantic coup the first named intends to accomplish with a little Chinese stick, the possession of which proved so fatal to Wetherell, is beyond my power to tell. I am only too thankful, however, that I am able to say that I am not in the least concerned in it. I am afraid of Nikola, and I confess it. And with this honest expression of my feelings, and my thanks for your attention and forbearance, I will beg your permission to ring the curtain down upon the narrative of my bid for fortune. End of Part 2, Chapter 6. Recording by Peter John Keeble of Nottingham, United Kingdom. End of Bid for Fortune, or Dr. Nikola's Vendetta, by Guy Boothby.